Futurist Jim Carroll from the virtual broadcast studio with another look at the concept of reinvention. What I've been doing is I've realized that 2021 is the year of reinvention for a lot of folks because we've certainly been through a lot. And what I've been doing is focused on a series of interviews with a broad range of different individuals in different careers, different backgrounds, talking to them about their reinvention process. So I interviewed a rock star from the 1980s. I interviewed a pastor. I interviewed a fireman. I interviewed a sport fitness professional, and just last week, a magician. And what I'm doing in these interviews is I'm exploring the mindset. How do you reinvent your career? How do you reinvent your skills? How do you maintain your optimism and enthusiasm for change in the face of overwhelming odds? What is that secret sauce? This is actually becoming material for my next book, which is in progress right now, entitled Now What? Reinvention and the Role of Optimism in Our Post-COVID World. Because the story through the next year, as we go into this transformative economy in which everything has changed, everything is different, we've got to reinvent. So I'm trying to work towards outlining what it is that people do to align to a new and different reality. What's their mindset? What's their process? What's their attitude? What's their optimism? And maybe that's a key word. The key word is optimism, because in the face of unrelenting change, it is very difficult to keep a brave face on and to do what is necessary in order to reinvent. So I actually had a guest scheduled for today. We had a cancellation. I brought in a mystery guest, so I'm going to head over to the broadcast desk and talk to this mystery guest as to what is involved in that key aspect of the secret sauce of reinvention, and that's optimism. Let's go. Let's bring in the guest. I'm actually joined today by Futurist Jim Carroll. Look, he's got a 25-year time span of advising some of the world's largest and most fascinating organizations on the future trends, disruptive thinking, forward-oriented leadership. I mean, look, NASA has had him in twice to talk to a room full of astronauts and mission directors and launch directors and rocket engineers. The Disney organization, one of the most creative companies on the planet, had him in for a talk on creativity and innovation. The Swiss Innovation Forum, the World Government Summit, the World Bank. He's been providing advice and guidance to organizations on what to do with the future, the trends that are going to define their future, and what they need to do to align to the opportunities that come next. Jim, welcome to the show. Yeah, thank you for having me in. You got to admit, this is a little weird, though, right? I didn't know what to expect. It's an opportunity, I think, to talk about optimism and reinvention and enthusiasm in the future, and just share a little bit of insight into what's going on out there. So let's start here. What is a futurist? What exactly is it that you do, and what's the insight that you provide to organizations? Well, what I've been doing for almost 25, actually over 25 years now, is I've been going into organizations in a broad cross-section of different industries, whether it's agriculture, whether it's healthcare, whether it's transportation, automotive, packaging, manufacturing, you name it. I've been providing them very concise insight on the trends that are going to change their world. What comes next, what they need to do about it, and sort of the innovation, disruption, creativity mindset to help them to get there. Most of this is done in the form of keynotes from a stage. Now, I understand you've had a few reinventions along the way. Tell me about the first one. You had a kind of an interesting career, and then you did a dramatic right turn into something really, really different. What drove you to do that, and what exactly was the career and the process of that transition? Well, it's actually a bit of a crazy story. I'm actually a professional accountant by background. Look, a long time ago in a land far away. For about 10 years, I was with predecessor firms of KPMG and other firms, and I was doing stuff with business, tax, advisory, consulting, accounting. But it didn't really, I think, appeal to my creative side. I remember doing the Meigs-Bryer test or the Myers-Briggs test, whatever it is. And, they sort of looked at me and they said, all the accountants are way up here in this quadrant and you're way the heck down there. How did you ever end up there? But during that process, actually way back in 1982, I got involved in technology, I got involved in computers, I got involved in online bulletin board systems, predecessors to what would eventually become the internet. And I kind of went, wow, there's something big going on here. I'm kind of fascinated by this. So you're motoring along. You're an accountant who's become a bit of a technology consultant. You're online. And then some magic happened. What occurred at that moment in time? Well, I decided to leave the firm after 10 years, and I decided to go out and actually pursue my passion, which was, to do some consulting around technology and, email and the internet. And you got to remember, this is like 1989. The world is a very different place. I mean, it was barely having an impact, but I sort of thought that something significant was going to happen, and I wanted to be a part of it. I didn't want to be an accountant. I wanted to be part of this big, massive global disruption, which I sort of foresaw coming. So I motored along doing that for a few years, and then I wrote a little book that actually was released in Canada. It was called the Canadian Internet Handbook. And this is just, when everybody was beginning to wake up to what was going on. We ended up, I co-wrote it with a fellow, we ended up on #1 bestseller list across the country. It began a career in which I wrote 36 books with my buddy Rick Broadhead. We were like the Lennon and McCartney of the Canadian Internet. We sold 1 million books all around the internet and technology and disruptive thinking. And at that point in time, I think I was already really beginning to deal with issues of trends of the future, what would come next, and disruptive thinking. And that's what led you into your career as a speaker. You found yourself on stage. What was your thinking as this crazy wild life was beginning to unfold? Well, I didn't really have a reinvention path in my mind. It sort of happened by accident. And I think that's a key concept for reinvention. Sometimes you will find yourself in magical circumstances. Things will just happen. You roll with it. You take advantage of it. But the other thing was, I think the reinvention process, I wasn't happy in my previous career. I was kind of bored stiff, and I wanted to follow my passion. That's a critical part of reinvention as well. You need to be willing to step out over the edge. You need to be willing to take risks. You need to be willing to put everything on the line if you believe in something. That's a critical part of what reinvention is all about. And I certainly did that. I mean, I had no certainty as to what was going to unfold, how things were going to unfold. And what had happened was I was invited into organizations to talk about this magical, massive global connectivity that was happening. And people were willing to pay me for it. So I launched a career that, went on and rode the rocket ride of the internet with those 36 books for about 8 years, getting in front of people, getting in front of audiences, describing to them, what would come next with these transformative times. And so this first big career change, it wasn't planned. You didn't have any big reinvention scheme or plan or strategy in mind. It just sort of happened by accident, and you ran with it. Is that what other people need to think about? That if they've got a passion in their life, that maybe their reinvention path is simply to pursue it and see how it might unfold, as opposed to having everything lined up perfectly for success. Sometimes you just need to make that bold leap to go forward. Yeah, I actually find it kind of sad, because I do see a lot of people who become stuck in careers. They become stuck in their current reality. They become stuck in a world in which they don't really have opportunity, and they miss out on that opportunity for reinvention, because I think what's always hanging sort of in the back of their mind is, I should have done it. I should have tried it. I should have tried to pursue these ideas. I should have, gone after it when I could. If you don't do that, then you live a life of regret, and a life of regret never ends up in a good place. But that first reinvention, that was entirely accidental. It wasn't planned. I had no idea when I left my career as an accountant that I'd become a speaker on stage advising companies as to what would come with technological disruption. Okay, so things are progressing. You're on stage. It's 1999, 2000. Everybody's thinking about the disruptive impact of technology and the internet. And then the dot-com collapse came about. And what happened to you? How were you impacted by what was going on? Well, I was pretty massively impacted. My entire world shut down. Opportunities just disappeared. Look, I had a column in a national newspaper in which I was writing about technology and trends and what would come next. And the editor killed it after the dot-com collapse, saying like there's no more technology to come. Like, people aren't interested in this stuff anymore. What happened after that? Facebook came along, YouTube, Tesla, all these disruptive things. I realized that the world I was living in, I was realizing that my brand, I was realizing that my message, I was realizing everything I did, fell out from underneath me. And I realized I need to reinvent and I need to do something different. So I decided, hey, I'm talking about the future. I'm talking about trends. People are already asking me to come into their organizations to do that. I'm going to become a futurist. And I decided that I wasn't going to limit myself to a local, national audience. I was going to pursue the world as a part of my strategy. Because I think connectivity at that time, the opportunity for marketing, the opportunity for outreach, truly I could become a global brand. So a lot of negative stuff is unfolding. How did you deal with that? Was that where you sort of rediscovered your optimism and enthusiasm and that mindset of I got to go forward? What was the process you went through at that moment in time? Well, I remember, I was depressed for like a day. My newspaper column is dying. Actually, it was a little bit longer, but I remember thinking this really sucks. But then I remember thinking, well, look, you're young. You've got an opportunity. You've already got some experience. You definitely have some insight. You've got something of value, and I think that's an important part of the reinvention process is you can beat yourself up when you're down. You think you have no skills. You think you have no opportunity. You think your future is cloudy. You can really beat yourself up, and you need to shift your mindset around. And that's where I really began to focus on optimism. I began to focus on the fact that we need to move forward. And so I decided, well, if they don't want newspaper columns anymore about technology, I'm going to write about other stuff. So I began writing about business culture and transformation. I had a great column in one publication in which I talked about aggressive indecision. And I was talking about what I saw happening with organizations, that they weren't making big, bold action steps and plans to pursue the future and to do what they needed to do to align new reality. So I decided, look, I got to reinvent. I got to do something different. And the only way to do that is to have a mindset of optimism, because that's what's going to help me to get there. That's got to be core to my essence with what I do. So a book. And the really weird title, What I Learned from Frogs in Texas. Kind of odd. How did that come about, and what was the focus of that book, and what was that doing for you in your next reinvention? That's really what was beginning to occur, wasn't it? Well, I'd written a bunch of books. I'm an author already, and I'm realizing as part of this brand reinvention, I really need to get away from the technology focus and focus on disruptive thinking and future trends. So I was actually in Houston at a resort, and I was walking down to this conference at which I was speaking. And it had rained, and there were all these, frogs in the road, and a bunch of cars were coming into the conference, and the frogs were looking one way, and they weren't looking at the cars coming. It was pretty ugly, and in my mind, boom, business parable. And I ended up telling a story on stage that day, what I learned from frogs in Texas, and that became a stage story, and that became a book, and that became a business parable, and that became a brand. Part of my reinvention, I implicitly spun a new brand, a new career, a new opportunity, an optimism mindset by writing a book about a bunch of frogs that were killed on a road in Texas. Kind of odd, but this is how you reinvent yourself, because you're always looking for the next opportunity. So this particular reinvention, you actually had a goal in mind. You actually had a specific purpose that I'm going to reinvent into this thing called a futurist, as opposed to your previous one where you were an accountant turned into a technology person, and your next accidental one, a technology person turned into a speaker on the speaker circuit. You actually had a bit of a plan around this reinvention. Yeah, it was a specific project. It was a specific direction. It was a specific mindset, that a brand shift, a message shift, a big global shift. I'm going to go after the global market. I'm going to go after the U.S. I'm going to pursue some of the top speaker bureaus in the world, who are the type of organizations that book me into events, because I'm perceiving there's an opportunity here where change is starting to happen faster than ever before. We're starting to see a lot of accelerating trends. We're really starting to see the disruptive impact of the internet and technologies and disruptive thinking. So I want to be a part of that. So yeah, this one was a little bit different from the previous reinvention, and this is really my second career reinvention, and I'm doing it with the specific intent in mind that I'm going from this place and I'm going to get over to this place. And look, it wasn't easy. it took a while, and I sort of say it was like I was playing the clubs. I was doing gigs in Iowa. I was doing the gigs in Des Moines. And not that it's Des Moines and Iowa, but it wasn't big stages, but I was prepared to put in the effort to get to those big stages. So, what is the basis for that optimism? Why do you manage to keep that optimism and enthusiasm in check when there's obviously a few downturns and challenges along the way? Well, I mean, what's the alternative? I look at people around me, and I see people who are stuck in a career, or they're stuck in some sort of present reality, and I mean, they're miserable, and I don't want to be miserable. I think it was also sort of a process of the message I tell on stage. Look, one of my running jokes when I'm on stage, walking in front of an audience is, I'm a futurist, and I can't walk out here and say, guess what, your future sucks, because I won't get a lot of repeat business. I think I explicitly decided, as I would pursue this trends and futurist and innovation path, that I'm going to focus on optimism. I'm going to focus on opportunity. I'm going to focus on reinvention. I'm going to focus on what I'm going through at a personal level and how I'm turning that into opportunity, and share that with audiences as to how they can get into that mindset. So it's sort of an explicit choice to have optimism at the core of my soul. Is optimism directly related to this idea of being a futurist, somebody who's advising people on what to do as to what comes next and how to align to a future world? I mean, is optimism a fundamental part of your role and what you try to focus on? Well, it has to be, because what I've come to realize, there's a lot of people who don't like the future because the future introduces change. The future introduces concepts that are foreign to them. It causes worry. It causes stress. Look, I've come to realize 1/3 of the people in every single audience I've ever spoken to do not like me, do not like my message, regardless of what I might say. And I used to think, is that me as a speaker? Is that my style? Is my tone? No, it's not. It's because they don't like what I represent. And what I represent is change. What I represent is challenge. What I represent is something that's going to rock their boat. And so I think part of that process of being a futurist and being an optimistic futurist is explicitly deciding I'm going to help them, discover what are the opportunities. Because I think what people are engineered, it's sort of like fight or flight. People are engineered to focus on the downside. They're engineered to focus on flight. They're engineered to focus, to run away from that which they don't like, and that's what the future is. So I've got to paint a rosy picture of the future. That's not to deny that the future has a lot of really negative circumstances. It does. There's a lot of things that go wrong, but I'm going to specifically focus on optimism as sort of a core message of what that future insight is all about. So along the way, you've had some, pretty magical stage circumstances with some pretty fascinating organizations, from NASA to Disney to the World Bank, the PGA of America. Tell us about a few of these, and tell us what people have been seeking in terms of trends and disruptive thinking, and how do they need to be challenged as to what comes next? What is really the role of a futurist? I call these the pinch me moments. I mean, every once in a while, I'm backstage, I'm about to walk on stage, and I'm like, holy cow, this is really weird. One of the most magical was Burger King's Global Franchise Conference in 2009. And it's at the Center for Performing Arts. I've got 7,500 people in the audience. I'm looking out. They had the Miss America pageant there the week before. And my message to them was social media was coming along, and customer interaction was changing. So my message to them was, as a franchisee, you need to align to the reality of what is occurring with this massive customer interaction change. The PGA of America, 500 professional golfers. One of my last events pre-COVID was for the World Bank in Morocco, and it was a look at the future of manufacturing. Just a huge number of pinch me moments along the way, but all of these have involved highly customized work, really detailed trends insight. I mean, look, for some of the gigs I walk into, I devour 1,000 pages of articles for the specific trends in the room. And look, I was invited into Disney, and that one, probably one of my most exciting events ever, because Disney is the creative engine of the universe. And Disney invited me in for a talk about creativity. It's at that point I think I'm realizing, maybe this reinvention thing that I'm doing, maybe it's kind of working. Maybe I'm onto something here. So you got quite the studio backdrop there. How did this come about? What's going on there, and what's the technology that's involved? Well, this is related to COVID. I mean, this is where I am right now. I'm hanging out down in my basement. COVID hit, and I mean, obviously a massive disruption. And again, my world fell out from underneath me, and I had to reinvent. And I had to do something different. And I'm going to be in my basement for quite some time. So let's build a studio. Let's build the world's best broadcast studio. And let's not sit around and wallow in desperation in the fact that business has collapsed. Well, let's build a new business. Let's build a new opportunity. Let's do the things that will help me pursue what comes next. And then again, optimism was at the core of my soul as I built this studio set and end up in these really weird circumstances in which I'm being interviewed by myself. I mean, kind of odd, but hey, we can do it. So let's go down that path. So it was directly related to COVID. One of your last events was in Las Vegas in February 2020. What was your thinking as COVID began to unfold, and how long were you, realizing that you had to fire up that optimism engine again in order to move forward? Well, it was actually just about a year ago this week, and I'm a fan of science. I mean, I track science. I think science is real. And I knew this was going to be bad. I knew that something pretty profound was happening. And I already had a green screen studio. I've been working with my overseas video producer, Alex. She's watching right now. Hi, Alex. How are you? And so, I'd already been working in front of a camera and learning how to do that. And so I remember there were some really bad days at the start. I mean, there was for everybody. When the global economy shut down and the stock market collapsed, I had like 24 hours of really bad negativity, and my wife had to put up with me. And then I decided, hey, that's not going to serve any purpose. You're going to have to reinvent again. And my wife actually said that to my sons. They said, well, what's Dad going to do now? He's not going to be on the stage. And my wife said, well, he'll just reinvent because that's what he does. Reinvention is at the core of my soul. And optimism is the energy that fires that reinvention. So with this optimism focus, you talk about something called the 7 stages of economic grief. Tell us about that and what people can learn from thinking about that as a model for moving forward in reinventing. Well, that actually came about after the 2008 economic downturn, and I've already been talking about it with the 2001, 2002 dot-com collapse. I mean, I've been through a lot of economic downturns in my career. I think what happens, and the way I describe this to people, is when you have a big economic shock like COVID or the 2008 market collapse or the dot-com collapse, people go through the 7 stages of economic grief. It's based on the bereavement process. They go through shock, anger, denial, bewilderment, whatever the stages are. The final stage is acceptance. And I've long talked about this on stage. I've long had this concept in my mind. I've long had this as a reality that drives my own optimism. And I share that with my audiences on stage. Look, you can wallow in depression in terms of the fact that your world is changing, or you can decide to do something about it. And so what history has taught us, and there's a really powerful set of statistics that I've used on stage. It comes from a study of GE that they looked at organizations, what they did in previous periods of economic decline, and those 7 stages of grief. And 60%, were just sort of marginal players. They didn't have any great success. They muddled their way through. 30% didn't make it. 10% became breakthrough performers because they specifically decided, despite lingering economic uncertainty, right now is the time they're going to focus on innovation, disruption, and opportunity. And that's me. I get to the acceptance stage. I can build this type of thing. I can pursue the future. I specifically decided, in the early days of COVID, I'm going to be in that 10%. I'm going to build the world's best virtual speaker broadcast studio to take to my global bureau partners and my global clients and say, hey, look, everybody's hanging out in Zoom. We can do something, a heck of a lot better with the infrastructure and the technology and the software and the capability that is out there today. Now, I understand you've been trying to specifically keep your optimism intact on a daily basis since, August 2016 through something you call your daily inspiration. Tell us about that. Yeah, August 2016, I went through some pretty complex personal circumstances, and I needed to do something to, get myself in a really good mindset and maintain that optimism. And one morning I got up, and it's early morning. I'm waking up early, and I'm having my morning coffee, and I'm thinking, how am I going to start my day? And what I actually did was I took a photo from the stage somewhere I'd given a keynote, and I tacked onto that some text as to how I was thinking, and that particular thinking was around optimism. And I kind of did that, and I wrote a little blog post around it, and I thought, well, that kind of made me feel good. So I got up the next day and dealing with these difficult personal circumstances, and I took a picture from the stage and I wrote a different quote on it, and I sent it out to social media and made it into a little blog post. And I felt really good. Well, endorphins kicked in, and I got up and I did it the next day, and I got up and I did it the next day, and I have now done that every single day since August 2016. It is the very first thing I do every single morning before I do anything else. I find a photo from a stage or my virtual stage, and I'm thinking about what I'm thinking in terms of optimism or trends or the future, and what I need to do for my mindset, but how can I share that with other people to help influence and shape their mindset? And I fire it out. This has become my morning thing. It's sort of like my morning meditation. It's my morning process that gets me going. Have you missed a day? And how many of these quotes have you actually put together? And what purpose do these serve? Well, I actually haven't missed a day. I mean, I have not missed one working day since this thing began. I'm probably up to about 1,600 quotes at this point in time. I was up here at 10 after 5 this morning and put together one. I think they serve two purposes. Number one, they work for me. This is I think it's a tool that keeps my optimism intact. It keeps my reinvention in process. It keeps me aligned to opportunity. Because look, we're all facing tremendously challenging circumstances all the time. So I do it for me. It helps me express what's going through my mind. But over time, I've built up a following on social media of individuals who follow and track these and read these every day. And I'm, every once in a while I get that email from someone that, look, I read this one, and that got me thinking, and that changed my life. And I mean, when you're realizing you're having a bit of a powerful impact on people through the actions, the deeds, the words, the things you're doing, it can really, really matter. And that, I think, is another reason why I do this, because if I have a chance to instill my enthusiasm and my optimism onto other people, to me, that's kind of a cool thing to be able to do. I also understand some of them made their way into a book that came out right before COVID-19 hit. Yeah, this is kind of useless. I dragged a copy down here. It's called Think Big, Start Small, Scale Fast. Stories from the Stage on Disruption, Transformation, and the Accelerating Future. Look, the book came out in January 2020. It took a number of these quotes and has a little story behind each of the quotes. What was behind that particular quote? What was the trend or optimism or innovation mindset that went with that? It came out, released it. I was excited to have it out there. COVID hit. Like, business books just absolutely disappear. So, I mean, it's out there. Has it been a success? Not at all. Do I regret doing it? No. Do you want to find out on my website? Yeah, it's there. I have had some people take it on, and they found it powerful because it does reflect a little bit of the story and the thinking that goes behind these daily quotes. So you're really in the midst of some pretty dramatic changes. I mean, the industry in which you worked has basically shut down. People are zoomed out. They're not really into virtual events, and yet you keep putting all this time and effort into enhancing your virtual broadcast studio and learning to perform in a virtual stage set and focusing on this virtual world when everybody thinks they're going to be soon going back to normal and meeting again in Las Vegas at conferences and conventions. Why do you keep doing this when maybe the signs are pointing that you might be on a bit of a fool's errand here? Well, I think the jury is out as to how our future is going to unfold. I am convinced that COVID is a massive disruptive trend. That there's really something significant happening here. And you think, are people going back to offices? Some will, a lot won't, because they've discovered the magic of lifestyle. The event and conference industry of which I'm part, I would do 40 high-profile gigs a year in Dubai and Oman and Tokyo and Las Vegas and Phoenix. Is that going to come back? Obviously it will, because people crave social interaction. They crave that ability to get together with other people. But at the same time, people have discovered that virtual, when done right, such as you see happening here, the technology is mature, the sophistication is mature, and so a lot of folks are talking about what we call hybrid events. Events that will involve some people are on site in Las Vegas and other people are on site at home, and the speaker could be in Vegas or the speaker could be at home. And you look at this, I could be in Vegas. I think my mindset is to have a tool by which I can do either. I'm not ready to retire. I mean, nowhere near retirement. And I think I've got a good, 10 years of sharing insight and motivation and trends with people. And whether I do that in person or through a fantastic virtual tool, I'm ready. And so I force myself to come down and do something live in the studio here every 2 days, simply to get good at it. Why am I willing to undergo an interview with myself? Because it's part of the process by which I can discover the magic of how to perform and interact in this unique virtual space. So I think there's something going on here, and I very much want to be a part of it. And not only that, I want to set the pace because I'm an optimist in terms of where this might go. Let's come back to the quotes. Give me a couple of the favorite quotes that you've put together with your early morning coffee over the years and what they've meant to people. Well, it's actually kind of weird. Just 4 years ago today, my favorite quote of all time, I got up one morning, I was thinking about what's really going on with disruption. And I put this together. I said, look, we're now in a situation where companies that do not yet exist will build products not yet conceived, using materials not yet invented, with process yet to be imagined. It was something like that. And, I used that on stage at one point, and I could see a bunch of people writing that down. That became my go-to talk frame. And I think that's the reality we find ourselves in. I mean, we're in a period of time in which there's so much going on that, the number of trends are simply magical. Another one I use a lot is some people see the future and see a threat. Innovators see the same future and see an opportunity. I mean, that's me. How do you choose to see the future? Do you look at it with fear? Do you look at it with worry? Do you look at it with apprehension? Or do you say, hey, there's something going on here, I'm going to be part of it? I use phrases such as think big, start small, scale fast. That became the title of another one of my books. There's been one where I was talking about education and skills. You now have to deliver knowledge that does not yet exist for careers yet to be defined, and you need to do it yesterday. I mean, I've used that in a bunch of education sensitive. Optimism is my oxygen. That's probably my favorite one, because I literally breathe oxygen each and every day. I force myself to. I got to get that breath. Because in a world of very significant ongoing change, you've got to maintain that. Do you think these have an impact on the reinvention voyage of anybody with what they are trying to do? I mean, do you have any real examples of how your reinvention and optimism message has, impacted or motivated others to follow a personal path of reinvention? Yeah, they actually do. I mean, when you get that email where somebody says, I completely changed my life because of something I read one day, whoa, like that's kind of freaky. Probably my favorite story is a middle-aged lady who saw me speak at a veterinary conference a number of years ago. And I'm talking about the rapid evolution of genomic science and rapid evolution of healthcare and the arrival of new materials and all kinds of trends. And a lot of this was specific to what was going on within the veterinary industry, but it was also a broader scientific. And she was a veterinarian, and she actually left her career and pursued a scientific degree, I think in molecular biology or something, specifically because what I was saying on stage that day motivated her to realize she needed to pursue something different. She needed to follow a different path. She needed to do something that would engage her a little bit more. I mean, look, when you get a message like that, you just kind of go, wow, I'm lucky to be alive and to be the person I am, to be able to share my optimism with other folks. So how do people sign up for these quotes? Pretty easy. They're at inspiration.jimcarroll.com, and you'll get an email every day. It's automated. It's not spammy. It's got the quote. It's got a little bit of a story, behind my thinking. And they also go out automatically on Twitter. They're posted daily to Instagram. They go to Facebook ×2, my personal page and my Futurist Jim Carroll page. They go to LinkedIn. They go to Pinterest. They go to Flickr. Like, they're all over the place. But you can really sign up at inspiration.jimcarroll.com. And like I said, I have not missed one along the way since August 2016. Every single workday one goes out. So I guess you talk on stage about something that you call the innovation killers, which is sort of the mindset that holds companies back. Do people suffer from the same sort of thing? What's that all about? Well, that's a key part of reinvention, and that's why I'm writing this book. I think people get stuck. Look, when I talk about the innovation killers on stage, I talk about companies who develop sort of this, I call it an organizational sclerosis that holds them back from pursuing the future. They make excuses. Well, you can't do that because we've always done it this way. It won't work. It's a dumb idea. The boss won't go for it. It's doomed to fail. It's too risky. We come up with all these excuses as to why we will not change at a corporate level. And I think the same thing happens with people at a personal level. It's too risky. I can't pursue my passion because it won't work. I can't try to do this thing I haven't done before because I might fail. And that's not how you're going to get ahead. That you're not going to get ahead if you set yourself up with a mindset and a culture and an attitude in which you're not optimistic. You're not convinced you can do something great. You're not convinced you can achieve success. Look, I've probably had 3 or 4 different 5 careers along the way, and this virtual thing is probably my 6th career, and I keep trying. Some of it hasn't worked. There's been failures, there's been heartaches, there's been mistakes, but boy, it's sure of a heck of a lot more fun than being an accountant somewhere. And what do you think happens next after COVID? Is there such a thing? Like, as a futurist, where do we go from here? What unfolds? What do people need to be thinking about? And what's this concept of future-oriented leadership mean in the context of what comes next? Well, the funny thing with the future right now is a lot of people aren't really thinking about it, or if they're thinking about it, they it's so far from their mind. I mean, from a corporate level, for example, everybody's still very much in survival mode. They're doing what they need to do to get through the day. I mean, supply chains are messed up, and product sourcing has gone out the window, and people are working at home, so teamwork has been a challenge. I mean, companies are a mess. The economy's rocking, but companies are a mess. And so people aren't really thinking about, well, where are we going to be in 2025? Where are we going to be in 2030? That's going to return. And part of what I've been explaining in a number of online virtual keynotes I've been doing is that what COVID has done is it has taken trends that existed before it happened, and it's accelerated those. So I've long talked about what I call the era of acceleration, and the fact that we live in a period of time in which change is happening faster than ever before. Well, it is now happening because of COVID way faster than ever before. And I actually have a video coming out sometime in the next few days by my working with my overseas virtual producer, Alex. Hi, Alex, me again. In which I'm trying to describe what has COVID done in the world of business. It's going to be about 5 minutes in length, and hopefully we'll provide a little bit of that creative thinking as to what you need to do. What I do know is this is massively disruptive. We are not going back to where we were before. We are only going to where we will be next, and it's a huge transformative event. And so when I go into agriculture, when I go into healthcare, when I go into manufacturing, you can take a look at the trends which are unfolding and really pinpoint what's different. Take manufacturing. We are seeing the acceleration of robotic technology, which existed before, but because of social distancing and because of supply chain issues, we are now seeing a massive acceleration of robotic technology within the manufacturing space. Healthcare, like, we're never going back to traditional doctor's visits. That's still going to be a part of what we do, but telemedicine has moved forward so fast. And what has come with that is a recognition of this trend that I've been talking about for years: hyperconnectivity, bioconnectivity, remote medical devices. That's accelerating at a furious pace now because of COVID, because it's part of the telemedicine trend. So companies aren't really yet thinking about what comes next, but I'm seeing signs of hope. I mean, the vaccine is rolling out. Countries are beginning to see some light at the end of the tunnel. And what's beginning to happen is they're moving beyond triage and survival into, okay, now what? What do we do next? And that's a lot of the type of very specific, customized corporate insight I've been providing for years. I mean, a lot of my events weren't association conferences, but we're somewhere where a Fortune 500 CEO was taking his or her team off site and saying, like, we got some big issue with new technology or new disruption or new competitor that we need to think about. We need to find some sort of topic expert to come in and open up our 2-day corporate offsite to get our minds thinking. And they'd find me, and that's where I ended up in organizations like NASA and Disney and Pfizer. I was actually with Pfizer's global legal risk and compliance team a few months before COVID hit, talking about the future of healthcare. It's kind of fun to look back. A lot of what I was talking about, in terms of speed, in terms of urgency, in terms of the fast evolution of genomic science, a lot of that stuff's come about. So I think organizations are just beginning to return to the process of thinking about the future. So what advice would you give to other people who are in, very complex, difficult career circumstances? They're thinking they need to reinvent to pursue some sort of new future, but they're terrified by the process and the idea and the concept. And you've been through a few. What advice would you offer to people? What's that secret sauce for reinvention? What's that Nike comment? Just do it. Pursue your passion. I think it would be a very sad and tragic thing to be on the cusp of retirement at 65 years old and think, well, I never did that thing I wanted to do. I think you have to have some courage. You have to be willing to take a risk. You have to have good partners. I mean, my wife has been fully supportive and really gave up her career. She's also an accountant. She had a golden career path with a massive global food company. She gave it up. We had some young children to permit me to pursue my passion and try to turn it into something. Always have optimism. You're going to get beat up. You're going to have downturns. You're going to have the days which are not great days. You're going to be in situations in which everything you've built has fallen out from below you. And you gotta put that oxygen of optimism in your soul and make it a key part of what you do. And that's why I'm writing this book. That's why I'm writing the book, Now What? Reinvention and the role of optimism in our post-COVID world. And that's why I'm talking to normal, everyday people. What did you do to reinvent? What did you learn? And we're going through the interviews. I'm working to find additional people to interview, but we're going through the interviews of people we've talked to so far, and there's some really magical thinking that is out there. And I think that's the type of thing, that's the type of insight that people are going to need for this next phase of what comes next in this post-COVID economy. Well, thank you for coming in and joining us. And there's a couple of websites that people can visit to learn more about the book and the daily inspiration, the daily quote, and other things. Give us a few of those sites that people might consider visiting. Yeah, the inspiration, the daily inspirational quote, you can find that at inspiration.jimcarroll.com. All the details on what I'm doing here in the virtual studio, they're at virtual.jimcarroll.com. The interviews where I'm talking to people about reinvention and what they're doing, reinvention.jimcarroll.com. If you want a little bit about 2030.jimcarroll.com. If you're a little intrigued by what I'm doing here and how this sort of magical process, technology is working, I've actually brought a lot of folks into the studio for a bit of a tour, simply to help them understand, how this works and, what comes next and how we can take advantage of this. Thank you for coming in. I got to admit, this is one of the weirdest interviews I think I've ever managed to undertake, but thank you for joining us. Yeah, likewise. Look, this is one of the oddest experiences I've ever been through, but you know what? I will say this, you're pretty good at interviewing. I think your questions did get to the point, and that's sort of a key thing of what I'm actually doing down here in the virtual broadcast studio is I have this interview capability. So if you go watch some of those reinvention interviews that I've done already, reinvention.jimcarroll.com, you'll see that I've been using the same type of technology to do this sort of reinvention. So yeah, kind of weird to be interviewed by yourself, but look, I thought this was kind of fun, and I don't know if I'd do it again though. Like your studio, it looks kind of cool. And it worked. Every single button worked. Every single process worked. Every single... here I am. I'm in shorts today, normally wearing pants. This is the home broadcast studio. And hope you enjoyed it. That was a fun experience. If you're wondering how I actually did that, I actually came down to the studio yesterday with one outfit and just pre-taped a bunch of interview questions in advance, cut them up into little segments. And I'm using a piece of software called Ecamm Live. And so I added those. I'm going to, a few of the questions coming in here. Added them in as scenes, and then I had a scene where I cut away to the part where I'm having a discussion. So I'd flip back to this scene here. I'm using a Stream Deck. That's what I'm using to pull up the little banner here. So put it together with some pre-taping, obviously, and then hitting the next scene where I'm having the discussion. Comment coming in, A.O. Johnson, and flippin' love this, inspiring, has motivated me to do similar for my pivot journey. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. If you can do something to inspire people and try to change a little, that's where you get the magic out of this. Gianna Rojas, the one-armed golfer. This lady is tremendously inspiring in that she's a golfer, she's one arm, and she's on her own virtual green screen studio voyage. And she says, I would love to have a tour. Gianna, if I'm saying your name correct, we will arrange that. Another comment coming in from A.O. Johnson, works well. I was wondering if it will work. So was I. Look, as I posted in the Ecamm group earlier, this had the potential for epic failure written all over it. But that's what I'm doing here in the broadcast studio. I'm forcing myself to push the boundaries continually. I'm forcing myself to try to do things from a technical perspective, which might be a little bit goofy. And how goofy can you get? I'm going to interview myself. I mean, that's flipping stupid. But what it does is it lets me explore a little bit more of the technology, lets me understand a little bit more of what's involved, lets me push the limits. And it also gets me, more comfortable all the time, hanging out down here in this virtual space and figuring out how to interact with people and do things. And so when COVID began and I began working down here in the broadcast studio, I decided I'm going to go live every second day. Even if I have nothing really to talk about, I'm going to come down here and talk about something. So last week I came down and I did a little show around the weekend. You remember he was going through the Hall of Mirrors, and I did a little show that we all felt like that in the era of COVID. It was about 3 minutes long, totally useless, not earth-changing, but it allowed me to construct a set. It allowed me to go through the process. It allowed me to do a little bit more of my technical journey to get better at this. So thank you for watching. Thank you for joining in. This show, whatever the heck it was taped and will go up on my blog probably tomorrow, and I'll probably use some clips out of it. But there you go. The first time you've ever probably seen somebody who has interviewed themselves. And I'm going to close off by running a little video clip here if I can find it. And thank you for tuning in.